Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, a link in the description below. Today we have absolutely breaking news from multiple areas around the world, as we've been able to hear directly from the President of the United States that direct sanctions and even further military support in support of Ukraine will occur if the Russian Federation will not reach a peace agreement within 100 days that is on amicable terms with American and Western interests, according to information that just came out today. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear of some very interesting news inside the Russian Federation, as it does appear that the Russian Federation has sustained more attacks from Ukraine overnight, with another attack hitting a major aircraft manufacturing and testing facility within the area of Kazan. Meanwhile, we've also seen that the Russian Federation has continued to pull on their support from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to continue to try and get more arms and equipment, as the Russian Federation is still dealing with dire manpower shortages, although the Russian Federation, technically by number, outnumbers the Ukrainians population-wise 3-1. We've also been able to see that Russian equipment is in short demand, as more Kazan SPRs from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have been spotted today in picture and video evidence near to the town of Tolyatti, as they continue to make their way westwards towards the Russian war effort and to once again attempt to break the Ukrainians before the West breaks Russia. We have also been able to see in other news around the region that the United Kingdom and the Royal Navy has sent forward warships and submarines to intercept a Russian spy ship nearly 45 miles off the coast and to send it running away back towards the Russian Federation, where it originally came from. We've also been able to see within the Baltic Sea that Operation Baltic Sentry is still underway at this moment, as a very interesting photo op was made for the public to once again remind them that NATO forces are within the region and once again securing NATO and Western interests at large. Meanwhile, around the area of Rajal, we have gotten incredibly good news that U.S. support has clearly continued into the present day, as the current administration has authorized an entire 747's worth of cargo to be delivered to the city of Rajau, to be then forwarded into Ukraine itself to help the Ukrainians in their fight in the war effort. We've also been able to see that President Zelensky has talked specifically about what must be done to even reach the negotiating table, and he stated that Russia must return to its 2022 borders at a minimum for negotiations to begin, and he also stated that he believes the U.S. peacekeeping forces will be needed inside of Ukraine once the war ends. Nevertheless, we have a massive amount of news today and a little bit in other regions. But moving on directly into the United States, we have been able to hear major news today about the developments that the United States and the President of the United States has put forward towards ending the war in Ukraine, as we have heard that the United States has openly threatened the Russian Federation in recent times in a strongly worded statement made on social media by the President of the United States. Status updates on the new U.S. administration's plan to end the Ukraine war are listed here from our Twitter. The link is in the description below. But heavy Russian sanctions are imminent if Putin does not negotiate in good faith. This was actually worded as a direct threat by the President of the United States when making this statement on social media, as they stated that Putin is currently tearing down the Russian economy, tearing the Russian Federation to shreds to continue this endless and needless and war full of suffering, and that if they were not to end it, then worse consequences were going to occur directly from the United States on Russia if that was the case. Zelensky, of course, has already demanded Russia withdraw to pre-invasion borders before negotiating, meaning that they would have to withdraw back to Crimea and back into the Donbass for negotiations to begin. The United States has openly accused the People's Republic of China as well of being complicit in failing to stop the Russian forces inside of Ukraine, and the United States is maintaining current arms shipments to Ukraine and may increase shipments if Russia doubles down. And we have also heard that as a direct threat today as well, once again confirming that it is not really in America's ballpark to conduct a policy of appeasement. It seems as though the act is that the Russian Federation needs to meet us more towards our direction than in the middle, and if they do not, more suffering will commence for the Russian Federation. We already know that the Russian Federation, according to their last statements, is not backing down off of their current policies and find these attempts completely pointless, and do see that continuing the war is within the interests of the Russian Federation. We will most likely be seeing how this exactly turns out, but we have been able to see quite clearly that Zelensky has made his own comments on the threats that the United States has made toward the Russian Federation today to end the war, and also what he believes would be required to begin negotiations. He has directly stated that Russia must at least return to the 2022 borders. This would be a fair opportunity to start a dialogue, showing that the Russian Federation already will not accept these terms, because these appear to be terms that are accepted and backed by the United States, and this is why Zelensky made the statements today. The Russian Federation controls Crimea and this area with the black border here before the 2022 invasion. These were specifically the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics combined inside of the Donbass, and within the area of Crimea, they actually control the area directly along the border of the Crimea Oblast, and that was what the Russian Federation controlled before the invasion of 2022. It is incredibly interesting to note that the Russian Federation would have to give up a significant majority of the territory that they currently control for peace negotiations to even begin under the current demands by the US and Ukrainian-led negotiating element. It appears that the Russian Federation will not meet these demands, and for this reason, the war will most likely continue on for quite some time at Russia's fault, not America's. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear inside of Ukraine that Zelensky has stated that peacekeeping forces inside of Ukraine post-war will need U.S. troops to be effective. As President Volodymyr Zelensky said, any effective peacekeeping force deployed in Ukraine will need to include U.S. troops, as he appealed to the President of the United States ahead of talks with the Russian Federation. It does appear that the president of Ukraine is believing that it will be necessary for a U.S. show of force to permanently exist inside of Ukraine to deter further aggressive Russian acts against the state of Ukraine, considering that Putin may remain the president of Russia for the foreseeable future. However, it is very clear that Ukraine is not lacking in American support and will not be lacking in American support on into the future, as we have already been able to hear that another 747 from the United States of America, we are believing this is the second 747 that has arrived in Poland since the current president has taken office, has arrived with a brand new stock of U.S. military equipment at the airfield of Rezhal and will be unloaded and then transferred from the area of Rezhal and into Ukraine to continue to supply and support the Ukrainian armed forces in their efforts against the Russian Federation and their occupation of the southern regions of the country. Meanwhile, we have also been able to see that some more aggressive actions or more overt actions have occurred by the Russian Federation today amongst other allies inside the NATO sphere and largely throughout the entirety of the US-led western regions, as we have been able to see that today a British submarine has ended up chasing off a Russian spy ship that was spotted. The spy ship is actually pictured right here, nearly 45 miles off the coast. We can actually see that some sort of a British surveillance vessel actually arrived and began to really try and inspect the Russian spy ship and trail it, and then we also saw that another British frigate later arrived and was shadowing the vessel as it was close to British waters. Later on in the day, we were able to get information that a British submarine did chase off the Russian spy ship from the British economic zone around the waters of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, nearly 45 miles off of the British coast. It is once again an important thing to remind everyone that Russian Federation vessels, or any vessels that have any relation to the Russian Federation of any sort, have been seen to be conducting acts of sabotage on critical infrastructure, or critical undersea infrastructure specifically, throughout the area of Europe. And it does appear that the United Kingdom, specifically the Royal Navy, is taking specific note of this and making sure to avoid any incidents that may occur near Britain's shores. Meanwhile, while that is underway, the multinational coalition led by NATO forces inside of the Baltic Sea, named Baltic Sentry, is still ongoing at this point. And we were able to get a really cool picture today of two Norwegian F-35s flying by the air defense frigate, the HNLMS Trump, which is a Dutch frigate within the area. We were also able to see that NATO has surged a number of units into the area as part of the Operation Baltic Sentry, which is a mission to provide undersea infrastructure protection from possible Russian sabotage. We were also able to see another picture here, once again, of the small Dutch flotilla that's within the area, along with a small German minesweeper, it appears, along with the Norwegian F-35s once again flying over them. It's an incredibly nice show of force to see within the Baltic Sea, and once again making it fairly clear to the Russian Federation that NATO's tolerance of Russian aggressive actions is going to be largely coming to an end at this point. It seems that NATO is more than happy at this point, as a combined alliance, to put forward an aggressive footing towards the Russian Federation, and to show them once and for all that the Western sphere will no longer stand for aggressive actions from the Russian axis of evil that has been plaguing the areas of Eastern Europe for several years at this point. While the Russian axis of evil has been plaguing the areas of Eastern Europe for years, it can be said that the Ukrainian drones of death, or really the lawnmowers of death more so, have continued to plague the interior and heart of the Russian Federation for about 2 years at this point, as we were able to see that within Kazan, another major fire at an aircraft manufacturing and testing facility has occurred today, and we do believe that this fire was started either by sabotage or a Ukrainian drone attack, which the information we largely do not have at this moment to figure out which. But a large fire has been reported at the fuel storage tank farm at the Russian Forces Air Force, it's that airfield in Kazan, and I'm not going to even try and pronounce that. It's the Borisov-Glebskoye airfield. There we go. Now we finally have it. But it's inside of the Republic of Tatarstan in Russia. The base hosts the Kazan Aircraft Production Association, also called Tupolev, at which conducts experimental testing of aircraft, as well as the Kazan State Aviation Plant. Some of the aircraft located at the facility shown in satellite imagery include Tu-22s and Tu-160s. The airfield at Kazan is a fairly significant one for Russian military abilities, or really the growth of the Russian Air Force. This facility actually produces a large number of Tupolev aircraft, and we can actually see a decent amount of them still being outfitted or modified on the tarmac. We can actually also see that Tupolev Commercial Aviation is also constructed here as well. But most importantly, the Tu-22 M3 backfires, which we can see on satellite footage here, as along with the Tu-160 Blackjacks, which also are produced in a fairly significant number. We do understand that the fuel tanks directly central of the facility have been stricken by some sort of a sabotage or drone attack and is currently on fire and burning rapidly. We are assuming that this would make it much more difficult for the aircraft manufacturing company to be able to complete its deliveries, as these aircraft would not be able to get the top off of fuel required or necessary for them to be able to make the flight to their actual final delivery point, meaning that most aircraft that are here right now, or most aircraft that may be coming off the assembly line, will be delayed in their delivery, giving the Ukrainians vital time to possibly continue more attacks to once again weaken the Russian Air Force and their air fighting abilities, or their air attack abilities, over the course of the remainder of the war. However, it is once again good to hear that the city of Kazan has seen another drone attack of a significant portion, or a sabotage attack, either way. We have also been able to hear that more North Korean SPGs are beginning to arrive in the country, and we've been able to see a picture of these once again being carried by Russian railroad assets towards the area of the Western Russian Federation. These are 170mm Kuksan SPGs, a fairly common sight within the Korean People's Army, as this is the most numerous and widely available self-propelled gun in the entirety of North Korea's arsenal. These SPGs are being moved directly to Western Russia to be used by the Korean Expeditionary Force within the area to continue to conduct fire support missions in efforts of pushing the Ukrainians out of the Kursk Oblast once and for all. We have seen that some of these SPGs have already been in operation to limited effect, and it does appear that the Russian Federation is largely using these not because they are better than Russian equipment, but simply because they don't really have enough Russian equipment to be able to continue to use on the front lines. And that was actually coming as additional news came out that the Russian Federation has actually requested more reinforcements, and North Korea is now expected to send these reinforcements into the Russian Federation within the next 2 months, and that's according to the Department of Defense's information and intelligence that has been gathered about Russian-North Korean relations within recent times. It is giving us a fairly large understanding that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is going to continue the human trade that they've largely begun to continue to get benefits from the Russian Federation, either in food resources or military technological abilities. It seems as though the North Koreans are adamant on continuing the war as long as the Russian Federation can, because they are getting a large amount of benefits that otherwise would largely be unavailable to North Korea through providing manpower and equipment to the Russian Federation in the current war effort. Once again, showing that the situation is largely desperate at this point for the Russian Federation and their actions in the Ukraine war. The military is hardly hanging on, and there was already reports earlier on in today, which we did not report as actual news because they're largely rumors, that a Russian commander has confirmed that he has had to begin to send wounded from field hospitals back to the front, sometimes even in crutches, because of the complete lack of manpower within these areas of the front line, showing that the Russian Federation's armed forces are heavily strained in some specific areas of heavy heavy fighting like the Pokrovsk front, where manpower losses are simply so large they cannot even bring in replacements in quick enough time. However, moving on from that area and out of Ukraine, we've also been able to hear some very interesting information in Latin America, as there has been some interesting hostile developments from Venezuela, where we've been able to see in video evidence today that several Venezuelan Su-30s were seen flying directly along the Colombian-Venezuelan border. We have heard that after this flight, the Venezuelan government immediately got to sitting out on the streets in Caracas with a cup in hand, asking for spare change because flying this plane literally cost the entire national GDP. Nevertheless, it does seem as though this is becoming fairly escalatory, as we've already seen that Venezuela has conducted an invasion to take control of a third of Guyana currently at the moment, and we've also heard earlier in today, although we were not able to get any kind of confirmation about this specific incident, that there was a Venezuelan Su-30 that also violated Brazilian airspace as well, showing that Venezuela is taking direct hostile actions or unfriendly actions towards largely all of their surrounding neighbors that share a land border with them, Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana, all simultaneously. We are going to be watching and seeing what the Venezuelans will be doing in the future. Maduro was just recently inaugurated once again as the quote-unquote president of Venezuela, and we are assuming that there may be further hostile actions as the Venezuelan economic situation appears to be an incredibly desperate one, and this may be leading Maduro to try and conduct some forms of actions that may see that Venezuela eventually gets some form of economic salvation or gets damned militarily. Either way, things are not going well for Venezuela, at least internally, and we're now starting to see that this is beginning to coalesce in hostile actions towards their surrounding neighbors. Nevertheless, that is largely all of the breaking news that we have today, and I have to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you would like to, support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below. I have to give a massive shout out to all the folks who supported us on Patreon, because each and every one of y'all has made this channel possible for years at this point, and especially made these video projects possible, as y'all are really one of the few ways that we are actually able to support these kinds of videos and putting them out. But nevertheless, a big thanks to all of our viewers and Patreon supporters. And also, I'd like to say, if you like to hear that things are largely going good at this point, at least with U.S.-Ukrainian relations and trying to, of course, achieve Western and American interests within the area of Ukraine, please make sure to put a good old USA down in the comment section below. That is a U, an S, and an A, or put a US of A if you want to. But either way, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all in the next one. Goodbye, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die.